Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go!
In other variations of your life, in other dimensions, if we use time in a previous life, you've learned certain things about you. In other words, it's almost like you've learned how to do this and now you want to learn this. And this is the life that you designed for you way before you were born. In a non-timeline reality, you're experiencing this version of all possible versions for a reason. And so just trust in that path.
Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go! Hi, welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we have another wonderful guest. This person is the co-founder of Ammortal, Dr. Steve Young. His moonshot goal is to help 1 billion people end their suffering from chronic illness and turning their health from liability into the greatest assets. The tools that he has co-created to achieve this goal of helping 1 billion people and other amazing souls and collaborating with them. And he's made healing systems. He's worked on creating a workstation to prevent posture, which I'm suffering myself every so often, and a lot of self-care strategies to help people heal a lot faster. He's also working on an AI system that can help people find and resolve the root cause of the illness versus just putting another Band-Aid solution on top. And he's personally treated and healed over 8,000 people in the last 20 years. It may not sound like a lot, but when you're looking at one person at a time, it's a lot of people. And all of them is just going deep dive into what is the root cause of someone's problem versus, again, like just Band-Aid, 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 which a lot of the Western practice with the best of intent is not hitting the root cause, in my personal opinion. Steve's got a formal degree in biomechanics and physical therapy. While he specializes in the medical, he has also gone deep diving into the spiritual, which he started like 30 years ago, so which I'm really keen to learn from. He's an early adopter of plant medicine, from mushroom to peyote to ayahuasca to hana. He's also worked with shaman, combining various plants together to create unique formulation, and even like taking the purging of your ayahuasca experiences. So, wow. I'm definitely keen to explore all the juicy content of Steve today. So welcome, Dr. Steve Young.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here. And feel free to squeeze away. I'm like a lemon, and you can make as much lemonade as you want. I'm excited.
Love it. So I want to share a little bit about how we got connected. It's kind of like synchronistic and similar to my last two guests. Out of nowhere, we've never talked before. We've never messaged each other before. But I posted something on my Facebook timeline recently, just asking the question, the purpose of life is, and then it's just got underscore, like asking people to fill in the dots. And you said to remember that we are divine. Most people type that to be happy, to be loved, to give, to contribute, to learn, to grow, which every single response is perfect. But within those 6 words that you typed in, I just felt there is more to this person and we are aligned on this journey. Because on my personal journey of discovery in the last like 2 years, I know one of my main purpose is to help people remember, is to remember that we are not just our biochemicals or spacesuit that we wear. We are a lot more than just this physical reality.
Sure.
We are divine. We are the creator. We are one. But I'm just starting out in this journey, uncovering stones and going from Taoism to Buddhism to shamanism. And as much as we all have the wisdom within and we can go deep dive, part of me, my mission is also to uncover the stone, because some people have gone through those stones and different strokes of different folks. Maybe certain people relate to a different way of learning, to taste different flavor. Just like we, some people prefer sour, some people sweet, some people want chili stuff. So you've gone through a very interesting path to get to this wisdom and now integrate it into your life and how to serve humanity. So how do you get to where you are today, Steve?
Yeah. So like most people, the duality of how people approach things is I got here by wanting to serve myself first, right? So I started on the spiritual path through the health journey, right? So I was pretty unhealthy when I was young, and that really came from just, completely being an unsupervised child. I was a single parent mom, worked 80 hours like a week, and I was pretty much left to do whatever I wanted. So I would like play video games 16 to 20 hours a day, and my entire day's nutrition was like a bag of Oreo cookies. And so obviously with that lifestyle, you're not going to be very healthy.
What games were you playing at the time, or what console?
Yeah, so this is 30 plus years ago. So this was like Super Mario Brothers, Zelda, right? This is like old school, like
the Nintendo, the red and white machine, right?
Yes, old school Nintendo games, right? And so remember, well, some people may not know this, like these days you have the luxury of like saving your game, turning it off, and then going back to playing. Back in the day, that wasn't an option. And so when I started the game, I had this innate drive to finish it. And there would be times where I would play, sleep, maybe nap for like a couple hours, wake up and play another 20 hours so I could finish the game. And so what I realized back then was,
hope it doesn't crash, because back in those days, like, it crashes a lot, and you have to put the tape out and then blow it.
Exactly. But what I didn't realize was back then I was developing this sense of determination, a sense of like following through. So in fact, I actually speak about how, not to get too sidetracked, but video game playing was actually one of the greatest assets of my life. And so, but from doing that, I was very unhealthy. And so at 14, there's got to be something different, and I wanted more out of my life. So, I started reading all about health. But interestingly, the first book I read when I was 14, which is There's No Difference Between Myself and Bill Gates, even though it's not popular right now, and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. The only difference was that they thought differently. And so I started to read books on how to think, basically. And the first book was Psycho-Cybernetics, which is about basically programming your subconscious mind. And from there, I started reading medical journals and all about physiology. So yeah, and from doing that, 30 years later, really stumbling upon so many things that relate to a human system, right? And so I, experimented with psychedelics when I was, a teenager. And, from there, explored with other plant medicines, started doing meditation when I was younger. Just get this, maybe 27 years ago, I started meditating. Just from doing that, really now we've created sort of this framework of understanding that really gets at the human spirituality, the human spirit, the divine essence. And really what it boils down to is what's the things that's blocking their light shining. And when that light is blocked, what we see in Western society, we call it illnesses. But when that light is blocked spiritually, it's profound for the human. And so now I've dedicated the last couple of years to creating platforms and systems and equipment to unblock their light.
Do you know that you were on a path of healing before you chose your degree? Was it just like, hey, like somehow someone in the family was a healer or doctor or something, or maybe it's an Asian thing to be a doctor? And
that's a great question.
Yeah. How did you stumble across, or do you know that it was your calling?
No, interesting. So when I was in high school, I actually had scholarships to go to art school. I was a very good artist. In fact, nowhere in my life up until today has there been this 10-year gameplay, it's always been following what I call magical breadcrumbs. Things will show up right in front of me, and intuitively, I knew there was like a knowing of saying yes. That's sort of how I operate my life. And so, yeah, even when I was in high school, when I was younger, while I was offered scholarships at art school, I knew I didn't want to be like an artist. And so the game plan was actually to take a year off and kind of soul search. And my mom suggested I still take a community class because my older brother, who's 5 years older, basically wanted to do the same thing, and he never went back to school. And so I literally like waited until the last day of registration at a community college, and I was like flipping through the registrations, like, hey, what am I going to do? And then, I was into health, and so that this whole 1 year thing about health, I was like, yeah, well, I'll sign up for this. At the end of that, I didn't even realize back then you end up like becoming a certified personal trainer. I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And doing that path, I kind of really liked that. And I was like, oh, I want to do more than just being a personal trainer. And so my cousins back then, younger, was going to Penn State to get their degrees. And it wasn't even until like 2 years into that, I was like, I don't want to just understand biomechanics really too. And so I looked into physical therapy, and I got a degree, a master's degree, a doctorate degree in physical therapy. And even when I graduated from physical therapy school, I had zero desire to like have my own practice. The person I worked for said, hey, let's partner and open up a practice. I decided, okay, yes, and I'll figure it out. And then it was just basically a series of yeses that came my way that led me to this path. Yeah, it wasn't definitely not like a calling. Something has developed. And that thing essentially is, and we can get into this a little bit more, travel. So as weird as it sounds, my future self tells me through visions, and I'm basically following a knowing that takes me to creating that vision, basically. And so I will say in the last 6 years, while it's not a calling, it's slightly different. It's almost like being open to having my future self communicate with me now through these visions and knowings.
You say biomechanics, you actually learn kinesiology.
Mm-hmm.
They taught that there. When I got back and neck pain, like I want to go to people ideally that have multiple modality, especially Eastern and Western modality. I find it is very limiting if someone just knows like massage or physio or chiro, because whatever the issue is, you may need to hit it at various levels, sometimes even spiritual. Can you talk me through a bit more about kinesiology? I'm a big believer of it, and all the muscle testing and all this stuff. I just find it fascinating. Like my friend just tested me and moving certain things, and after putting certain vitamins in me, hey, you're deficient in vitamin D. So what the? And after reading David Hawkins' Power versus Force and Letting Go, it's like, wow, you test the truth on all this religion. So I've never really like practiced on implement. I've dabbled in trying to do muscle testing myself. But like, tell me about like the art of like kinesiologists and muscle testing. Is it within the same line, or is it kind of like different modality?
Yeah, we can speak to this. So I will say that in the term kinesiology from a science perspective has been around longer than the modern day use of kinesiology, right? And so like when I was at Penn State like 26 years ago, kinesiology essentially from a science perspective, it just means applying physics, right? Like Newtonian physics to a human body. And so, which is a lot of times I will use words like biomechanics, and technically the degree, like my big fancy piece of paper, it does say a degree is the more recent term use of kinesiology, which is using muscle testing to test essentially, are you in or out of alignment with a thought, an emotion, a nutrient, a food, basically, your system, is it in alignment with whatever you're testing? That's the newer term or newer use of the word kinesiology. When I went to Penn State, it was still physics, basically, right? So it's still physics applied to human body. Like if you held a 1 pound weight in front of you, as long as I know what's the distance of that hand to your torso, I can figure out exactly how many pounds of pressure is going through your neck. Like it's that type of physics. So, which is very different than a muscle testing. I didn't get exposed to the muscle testing type of kinesiology until, 15, 16 years after that, which had been about 9 years ago. Yeah. So just to clarify those two, it's like the same word with two very different definitions. And again, so the way I see the modern day new age use of kinesiology, essentially, if you think about it, we're all at a subatomic level, we're all just a bunch of vibrating molecules, right? And so from a quantum mechanics perspective, essentially it's like, well, if two coherent vibrations are in alignment, you can amplify the wave. If they're not in alignment, the waves cancel out. And everything is in vibration, And our vibration actually is changing moment to moment based on our thoughts, our emotions, and that's within the 3D way of looking at things. If we go beyond 3D, there's other things affecting our vibrations that, for example, someone else in a room, their thoughts and emotions are technically affecting our vibrations. And we can explain this scientifically now, not even woo-woo anymore, because there's photons that we emit out of our bodies, right? 90% of our DNA makes light particles that travel away from our bodies. And those particles are a wave, right? They're just not like a bullet, it's a wave. And their thoughts and emotions are controlling the wavelengths of light particles that's emitting from them, and that's being broadcasted into me. And so, and my light particles are broadcasting to them. Actually, my light particles are broadcasting to everything, every molecule around. And so, muscle testing is a very physical way to measure the symptoms of things that are not in vibrational alignment. That's the way I look at it. It's more of a science, physics way of looking at things, but in my reality, that makes much more sense.
How accurate do you find it is? Like if you're asking yourself, like, what is my name? Or am I deficient in certain vitamins? Like, is it sometimes your conscious can affect the muscle testing is accurate or not?
Yes, absolutely, right? So because our thoughts and emotions are constantly affecting the vibrations, you can be inaccurate, if that makes sense, right? In other words, in the moment that you're testing, if a flash of memory of some kind of heightened emotional experience appeared right before that test may not be the most accurate. And so to answer your question, it depends on the practice of the tester to remain very, very, very calm in a meditative neutral state as you're doing the testing. And saying if someone's testing you, absolutely their thoughts and emotions can be influencing your test results. And so it becomes, again, the skill of that practitioner to have a practice of being in that calm meditative state as they're testing. Absolutely. If that's not practiced, the error rate can be high, for sure.
So I know that there's practitioners, including David Hawkins as well, you test stuff even beyond yourself, like how truth is the Bible, the Quran, and Buddhism, or different religion compared to the original form. Or, hey, is this person telling the truth, which you don't even know? So how does it work in terms of, like you just explained, is it still in line with the body emitting certain photons, the lights coming out, and somehow we are all connected into this universal consciousness and that we can just download the information?
Yes, yeah. So there are many frames of reality, and I don't think any man can express the true frame of reality, right? Because if you think about it, the only way for me to tell you what the frame of reality is, I have to use words. At least if we were head-to-head, definitely can be accelerated. If we're both on plant medicine, I play with this, I could definitely download stuff into your thoughts that is 10 times more accurate because I'm not using words. Once we use words, words are boxes, right? And a box, while it makes it clear, a box limits. And it's very possible that the true nature of reality can't be described because our main tool of communication right now in the world is language, right? Is words. And so a lot of times I would use different frameworks to get at it because we don't have a useful tool right now that can actually fully express the meaning of things, right? And so if I use a different frame of reality, if we were in the Matrix, like a video game, we can use a video game analogy, we're the player and the programmer. As we're playing this game, we're actually adding to the source code because we're also the programmer. And we can tap into the source code. And the source code contains all the information of reality. Right, so that's another way to look at how the muscle testing, how can you actually test all the things that you mentioned? Because all that information and data is stored in source code. And so we can just access that source code anytime that we want.
Wow. Man, you've articulated in such a easy to understand but yet scientific way. And I'm just like a little kid in a candy store, like, hey, which jar can I open next? So I'm going to open a lot of jar this podcast. And if you're listening, you find it, hey, like this is interesting, but yet how do I follow? Towards the end, I'm going to ask Steve, like, how do we integrate all these things that we've talked about and you've learned into actual practical solution, whether it's for your health, your wealth, your relationship? How do we become a better version of ourselves or whatever that you want to become? Integrating all this knowledge. So I don't know where I should go first because I started doing dreams recollection as of a week ago. And I
Okay.
had my first lucid dream experience a week ago as well. And this morning when I woke up, in the dream, I was explaining to people about the waking dream and the sleeping dream. And I'm actually finding it through, in actual reality, a 3D reality. When it's at nighttime, I get excited because there's almost time for me to transcend myself and to assess the truth. In the daytime, to integrate. So while I was explaining all that, it's like, dude, I'm in a dream. I thought it was so real.
Yeah.
And one of my to-do lists of things before I die is visit my kids in their dream. And so you talked about like sending thoughts or something like through plant medicine. So can you share about like what's your understanding about the plant medicine world? Like in the game mechanics way, are these cheat codes or special tools that we've embedded for ourselves to kind of like access the back door?
Yeah. I think first I'll speak about the dreams because that's a really good frame to understand the plant medicines, and also the use of language. You know, I'm a huge fan of language. Like every sound has its own vibration. Now, I always remind people like we don't piece the alphabet together to form a word. We spell words, and so hidden in our language are from the ancients, like the real magical people from like thousands of years ago. They actually were leaving clues throughout civilization for us now. And so every word is a spell. And so when we use the words like real, that seems so real to me. What's fascinating is we associate real with our five senses, basically, right? And so the ancient Egyptian cultures believe we had 360 senses, not five. Right. And this is pretty mind blowing if you think about it. Like that basically means we're only experiencing about 1.5% of all senses that are known out there. And so, and what's fascinating is if you go in that rabbit hole, we can't even use words to express the 360 because the words contain it too much. And so, going back to dreams and what's real, there are some spirits. One of my favorite things these days, I don't really read books by humans anymore. For the last 2 years, I mostly read books that's humans channeling spirits, right? It's fascinating. And so there's a great one called Seth Speaks. And this entity, this collective consciousness, talks about how when we're sleeping, we're actually more powerful than when we are awake, right? In other words, that reality, our ability to access multiple dimensions while we're quote unquote sleeping. Just keep in mind that sleeping is just a human made term. What if we labeled it, it's the time where my soul and my consciousness gets to travel beyond the limitations of my human body. I mean, obviously that's a longer phrase than sleeping, but it actually is a more accurate phase, right? So we get to question every word that we've been using. And so in that reality, yes, dreams and our ability to experience life that way is ultra powerful. My frame of reality is every infinite version of you is happening and has happened, and you're just right now experiencing this version. Interestingly, you can actually change and bounce. You can, take your consciousness and your physical 3D sense and go to any version that you want and of any outcome. And your dream can travel through multiple variations of your reality, basically. And so lucid dreaming is a term. And from a spiritual perspective, you can also look at this. It's taking our 3D physical form, planet Earth right now body, and being able to tap into and influence our consciousness as it travels into whatever dimension that we want, right? And so the reason that it's important to set that frame is having that understanding helps understand now plant medicines, right? And plant medicines essentially are portal openers. And depending upon which plant that you use, they open different size portals, and let's just say different shape portals. And so, and you had mentioned it's like a cheat code. In a way, yes, it definitely, I believe part of our remembrance is remembering that we can access and open these portals at will, right? At will. However, when you take plant medicine, it's like instant. You don't have to practice. It's like, boom, portals open. And so that comes with some interesting duality with it. One, it could come with the frame of reality, the interpretation that I need plant medicines to open portals, which is absolutely not true. There's actually 8 paths. There's 8 different ways to open these portals. I'm not an expert. We have team members that are. It's just one of 8 ways of opening these portals. And 2, I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are doing plant medicine now do have this sense of like, I need to go back into the portal. I need to do more plant medicine to learn more. And so I feel like that could be tempered and balanced and harmonized with the realization that you can actually open these portals anytime that you want. right? It just may not be as big as like, boom, ayahuasca. It's a very big portal, but you can open up, different portal sizes anytime that you want. So that's sort of the way I take it, is that it's just a portal to access different dimensions. However, I'm not sure if you've talked to people about this. When that portal opens, vibrations from the other dimension can also come into this dimension, right? And so we can call it vibrations, we can call it spirits, we can call it entities. Essentially, it's another thing that doesn't belong in the now, because it's a two-way street. The portal's a two-way street. And so, and what's really interesting is typically the lower vibration stuff is the most accessible and easy to come through, which is why if you talk to people who do plant medicine, they'll be like, oh, I face some really dark stuff. Well, they don't realize some of that dark stuff isn't even them. It didn't even belong to them. It was an external entity invading their energy field. And sometimes they can, almost like a computer virus, can kind of stick onto your energy field, and you're walking around with a little bit of an energy that didn't even belong in this reality, in this dimension, in this plane of existence. And so these are all very great things to surface if people are into the whole spirituality, portal, plant medicine, dimensional world.
And do you believe, I've heard it from one of the shaman, he talks about that these lower dimensional entities are really just, well, everything is a version of us, but it's almost like they're humans, but after the end of their lifetime, there's something that they haven't let go of, and they're still in the negative state. And so they're kind of trapped in this world that they still haven't forgiven or whatever stuff, and this negative energy. And so when they come up, not just like every time that when we're getting negative thoughts, you talk about 365 thoughts. I don't know whether I think I pretty much downloaded. It's just a thought came to me that, hey, we talked about our five senses, but what if at least this is our thought is not our thoughts, it's our sixth sense? What if we isolate that? Hey, I'm thinking this person is a mean person, but that's not me. It's not me thinking he's a mean person. It's almost me tasting chili. I don't call myself a chili plant. And so that thought that comes in is the sixth sense and our feeling. This could be a seventh sense, and there could be eighth sense in our intuition and other stuff. But for those people that the entity has been trapped, it's like a version of us haven't let go. And so when we get a thought, or during the ayahuasca ceremony, like they come and visit and you have a dark experience, is actually they have gone through a similar experience. They just want to communicate with you. This is what I've gone through. Hear me out. And I think in Chinese, some of these spiritual custom, they kind of have that, like almost like someone being possessed. They're trying to express what they went through and relaying to you. And if you try to fight it, you'll have conflicts. And that's why they always say, like, the only way to meet it is with love, and accept it and letting go and breathe. And when you see it as what it is, not really entertaining it to be, oh, wow, crap, because they feed on the fear. It's almost like acknowledgement. If you have people bitching around the office and go, yeah, like, geez, your boss is, or your manager sucks. You're feeding to that gossip and you're making it bigger. So is that kind of like, do you have the same belief of what those lower dimension and stuff that comes up are?
Yeah. So I believe the actual reality is so complex we can't currently comprehend it. I will use different frames, right? So in the oneness frame, everything is us. We are the creator. Like, we are basically God. And so all those entities, it's a version of us that we created for sure. And the way I look at it is, this pretend oneness is like red glasses. You'll be able to see things in a red way that you just can't see unless you're in that frame. And so in the oneness frame, I feel like that's very useful if we want to embody and feel and integrate things for sure. In the non-oneness frame, in duality, right, where there are opposites and separation, that is equally as useful. That frame helps us understand and intellectually compartmentalize and connect dots and frameworks. Like, the separateness helps us see the separateness and helps us with the knowing of it, right, the understanding of it. And so, and know that under both frames, the language and the entire strategy and framework is actually different. And so if one were to practice embodying oneness in self and understanding and emotions, then that's great. Using the oneness from it is a version of me. If one is seeking understanding and learning, they can actually go and use duality, right? So that's the way I look at it universally. I like to use frameworks that apply to most things, or all things really, not just in that situation. And so they're both correct in a way. Like, they are separate entities in the duality frame of reality, but they're also all just us in the oneness reality, right? There's no right or wrong. And even language, when people say it's a negative emotion or positive emotion, in the duality world of existence, that it's helpful to discern In the oneness world, there's no such thing as good or bad, right, wrong, positive or negative, right? And so we get to choose which frame of reality we want to use moment to moment that best helps us with whatever intention that we have for that moment.
That's a great way of really distinguishing the two, because I've always have challenges in my communication and even in my thought process. One way you've got the Taoism or some of the I've learned from O&O Academy, like from India, like oneness, and
Sure.
everything is as one. But then on the other side, you've got the practicality of the dualistic world and trying to explain it good and bad. And going back to the Taoism, are there other frames except for the two that you've just mentioned, or the unlimited frames?
I think those are the two most useful frames, I guess. I mean, there are other patterns, right? For example, everything is in rhythm, right? And I feel like there's some core concepts that govern this matrix that we're in. Everything is rhythm, right? And then another concept is everything, in duality at least, everything has opposite reaction, action, reaction, right? And so what's interesting is nothing we've ever seen, if you experience life, nothing in nature, nothing in human existence is linear. Everything is in rhythm. And to me, that's a hint from, the divine within ourselves, the matrix, whatever you want to frame it as, that if you're stuck in a linear anything, if you're stuck in anything linear, like always in oneness doesn't work, always in duality doesn't work, but rhythm of duality and oneness work, right? And so that's another way to look at things, that recognizing there's a rhythm to everything.
So what about the monks that's meditating that seems quite zen? Are they always quite linear, or they internally they're going through like a waveform? Like, what do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. So all emotions, if you think about it, has use. A lot of people will say, for example, like fear is a negative or a bad emotion. And my example of that, whenever someone says that, is a tiger is running at you. It's about to eat you. If you're like, I am zen and at peace, you're going to get eaten, right? And so fear has a very useful purpose in that moment because you run, right? So another way to look at it is, God, universe, the matrix that we're in, wouldn't create anything that wasn't useful, right? So to answer your question about the monks, I don't think the monks moment to moment only feel happy and only feel bliss and only feel acceptance. There must be moments where they feel the other, and they've learned to use it for their advantage, right? So they've learned to process it well. They learn from it. They've learned to experience some kind of enlightenment from it. I always say, like, you can learn the secrets of the universe from like staring at grass. It doesn't have to be at a big seminar or a course or a big mistake or a big whatever. And so I feel like the monks have learned that, right? It's almost like they can extract value from the tiniest things, whereas many people are used to, I need a big thing to extract value from.
Yeah, I get it from my own personal awakening experiences or even personal development. The more that I learn, and not just learning, but applying it as well, but the more sensitive I seem to become. The things that wouldn't trigger me in the past is now triggering me. And like even looking at the grass, the emotion it evoke, or even killing a mosquito, the emotion they evoke in me compared to the past is a lot more heightened. So they probably go through just different from the external stuff. It may not seem like much is happening.
Absolutely, right? Because, they're not punching the wall and beating their chest, but they're for sure experiencing those waves of emotions and waves of everything. Because I'm sure if you have like a Buddhist monk or any kind of monk here, and we ask them, they would recognize the same thing. There's a rhythm to everything. We're not meant to live in anything linear.
Going over the topics of language and the power of language, have you looked into like Chinese or other languages? Is the same concept that's been embedded?
I speak Mandarin, but I don't think I know, I left Taiwan when I was 8, so I don't have mastery over, that language. We worked with like Native American Indians. They call themselves Dene, and they had mentioned that the majority of those words are verbs. And if you think about it, what they didn't do in life was they didn't spend a lot of time naming things, which are nouns, right? That's a tree, that's a blah, blah, blah. They actually spent most of the time using action words and verbs. That is fascinating for you to think about, like, what does that do to a society, right? They weren't over relying and over emphasizing learning by naming a bunch of stuff. They were more action-oriented people, experiencing, right? It's a verb. They were actually living life versus trying to understand life. And what's fascinating about that, then, if you think about it, it's like, well, who gets to actually, at the end of their day, like, 200-year-old people once started naming a bunch of stuff. one lived. Who had more wisdom? I'm going to guess the person that lived, right?
Yeah.
Really interesting how just language completely controls our reality. One of my favorite movies, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, it was called Arrival. On the surface, it looked like this alien movie. Aliens came, but the biggest takeaway was she basically gained superpowers by learning their language, which is time travel, right? Just by learning a whole new language. Yeah, it's fascinating how our language dictates our reality.
Yeah, I watched that movie. It's great. It really changes my paradigm on how I looked at languages and life. And one of our previous guests, Tom Green, he also talked about every time you use a noun. I'm not that great at English, so it's good that I'm teaching my kids. I'm cosmic schooling, homeschooling the kids right now. So I'm starting to learn about verb and noun and pronoun and all the differences. But when you start naming an actual object and you're putting it in a box, like when I tell you an elephant, you're probably picturing an elephant of a certain shape and size and look, but it may be completely different to what I'm thinking. So it's really putting a lot of limitation. And as soon as I put it in a box, I don't need to worry about that. I know what that is. And you're limiting your life experiences versus even naming the country. I heard it from someone. When you say like India, oh yeah, I know what India is like. Even like India and Pakistan is, if I point to the border and you're just looking at a different patch of grass, you wouldn't know the difference. But the minute that we put the wording and the label on it, we start to really box our whole experiences. It's almost like trying to put the whole universe within a capsule. It doesn't work.
Yeah, this is a concept of duality, right? So everything has opposites. Just think about it. People name things to know. If you have to know, the opposite is to not know. Right. And so in other words, the intent to know things by naming it comes with not knowing it. It must. This is a fascinating thing about duality, right? And so when we name something like you just said, India, elephant, because we want to know it, what also comes with it is now you actually know it less. It has to have opposites. Good comes with bad, night comes with day. Everything has opposites. Yeah.
So I don't know whether this question is too out there, but since we've talked about time, or we're going to talk about like time travel and the future and stuff, we might as well talk about this. Telepathic, obviously, it is a more advanced way of communicating, a more accurate way of communicating. Have you got sense of when are we going to have these skills? Or, well, that's probably a limitation I'm putting on myself. How do we assess these skills? Even when you talked about going through plant medicine and sending a thought to someone, you can't just touch on it. You need to elaborate how a journey happened.
That's a big topic. I'll begin with that very specific comment, the whole communicating without words. I've had that feeling for years, right? Recognizing that words are limiting. And so whenever I do any kind of plant medicine with a group of people, as long as the rules are you can talk, because there's some places you can't communicate, like you have to be in your own space. You actually can't physically communicate or verbally communicate with another human. But there are certain shamans who allow that. And if they do, I typically will experiment with this, which is, hey, let's actually try to communicate without using words. And so we just kind of like put our heads together and no words whatsoever. And you potentially see visions. There's a knowing, and there's something else. I don't think I have a word for it. But sometimes when you're done, both people agree, like you actually within 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's hard to track time when you're in plant medicine. But in that short period, we now know each other better than like that person knows someone for 10 years.
What?
Right? So yeah. And so there's a level of connection that cannot be achieved through words, right? Through communicating with words. And so that is absolutely possible. And now the plant medicine does kind of enhance that. I don't think it's necessary. I've had plenty of times. I'll give an example. So a thing that happened to me 6 years ago that opened my mind to this was I live in New Jersey. I worked with an intuitive coach that can do this. She lives in Austin, Texas. I went upstairs to get a massage from one of my staff members, and then she texted me 3 minutes later and said, "How was your massage?" And so she can communicate with a sense of me without words. And so that was like the first time I was like, oh, this is possible. And it really opened my reality to exploring this. And so some people can call it intuition. That's just, again, one avenue of it. But all humans can. Scientifically, right, it's called quantum entanglement. We can use quantum entanglement to explain some of this, right? If any listeners are not familiar with quantum entanglement, it just means that we all have a mirroring molecule somewhere out there. And whatever we do to our molecule in real time, there's no time lag, that molecule experiences the same physical phenomenon. And so, and this is proven by quantum mechanics. They're starting to build satellites that can communicate through quantum entanglement. And again, that's just one label and one framework we can use on how we can actually relay messages to each other without using any kind of verbal or auditory or anything.
Are all things quantum entangled since we came from the same Big Bang and same cell, same explosion? People say every time we breathe, we're breathing in oxygen that recycled from Christ or from Buddha, because it's the same thing that being recycled, and water has so much conductivity and that ability to communicate with other water atoms or water molecule. Is everything entangled, or is a new molecule and atom that's being split up all the time, so it's not necessarily everything is entangled?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so this goes back to the framework of duality versus oneness.
I thought so, yeah.
Right? And so we can look at it, and it helps us to understand everything is oneness. Everything is together. That goes down a different path of understanding and experience. And you will learn a lot from that and experience and embody a lot of value from that. And if you play with duality, nope, there is some separateness. You will learn some awesome stuff there too. And so what's awesome about this is with everything in life, you can go down both roads and then come back and integrate what you find useful. I feel like that practice has been really serving for me and people we talk to, because it's not like either or. You have the choice of both. So
yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. So going back to your communication experiences in the ayahuasca journey, or whatever the plant medicine journey was it did you have a pact with a specific person, or was it a group of 5-6 people and try to communicate with all of them?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I play with it all, right? So anything from definitely one person or group where whether we are all physically touching or not physically touching, and having a sense of what people are. So I'll give you one time when I was in South America and we were doing San Pedro. So the shaman led the experience. There was maybe 11 of us. And the shaman just took a little tiny dose, and he said to us, this allows me to connect with all of you, right? Just to keep an eye on you, basically. And so I remember during one moment where I literally could feel, and there was no talking. The rules are you can't even physically communicate with another person, because he wanted everyone to have their own individual experience, right? But in one moment, I literally had this thought oh my God, right now, without looking at anyone, I can feel what everyone is experiencing, right? I could literally feel what everyone is experiencing. And 2 minutes after that, I had that thought, he came over because he knew what I was thinking. He said, look, don't worry about everyone. Let them have their own experience. He basically, in my mind, that I had the thought that I could read everyone else's, what they were going through.
I'm always amazed that the shaman, I have so much respect for them. They're almost like the conductor in the orchestra. They're just pulling all the strings, and like the childcare center looking after the kids, and little kids go out and play. Hey, come back. Yeah. Hey, no, don't touch that. Behave. Sometimes people need to change off their diapers as well. And man, so much respect for them.
Yes, it is. They are practicing something. It's almost like, they're like black belts in something that we're just white belts at. And so we're like, oh my God, this is incredible. So, yeah.
Have you gone down the route of tracing back in Taiwan, the Aborigine from Taiwan? What were some of the ancient wisdoms, a form of shamanism they were practicing as well?
I haven't. So part of me knows that in the next 5 to 10 years, once I am done birthing to the world what I'm birthing, I'll have another phase in my life where I'll get to explore some of these things. And so right now, my main focus with my attention is the thing that I'm birthing onto the world.
So you're pregnant right now?
Exactly. Pregnant with something I've been working on for, a long time, right? And so, and when I talk to certain shamans who know how to communicate with ancestors to bypass time, and all of them that I've talked to know this is going to happen. So it basically confirms what my future self shows me. And so I'm just being very mindful of my attention right now in birthing this thing. The main thing that we're working on is this, essentially it's a platform, like an app that gets people to completely take the behaviors that sort of awakens them. And, it's under the disguise of it's a healing app, because it's a lot easier for people's consciousness to swallow. But while they're in the app, the behind the scenes is we're helping people wake up, basically. We've been birthing this for a while, and we're right now working with the #1 gamification expert in the world at designing this app. So we've identified the action steps, but we can't just tell people, go do this, right? Because then that doesn't work. So we've hired a #1 gamification expert to make an app that they understand the psychology of human design, human behavior, which will get people to want to go through and take these action steps. So that's my main focus for a while.
Man, imagine that. I'm always amazed. Just like when you're in the plant medicine journey, you're amazed at the different lessons that's been taught to you using different scenarios, different visuals and different storyline, and it's just constantly like reinventing like new things that you could never using, or I wouldn't say never, but I couldn't use my conscious mind to be so creative, at least not at that point and ever that I've experienced. And yet with the whole COVID-19, I use it as an example, it's inspiring great change in this world. I could never imagine that. How could you get everyone to have self-time? The whole world, this is unheard of. It's so imaginative. And what you just talked about, getting people almost like to play like Angry Bird or Pokemon Go and get working at the same time. Who would have thought of like turn out that way?
Yeah, and it wasn't like, again, it was like 10 years ago this was going to happen. In fact, our first iteration, our first idea, which you read, like AI developed thing to solve root causes, we actually have pivoted from that into this game. And again, through a series of breadcrumbs, things came into my consciousness or people that said, hey, how about this? I'm like, okay, let's do this. It's been literally this trusting your gut instincts and living in the vibration of love. Like literally just magic happens for sure. It's definitely not like, hey, Steve's creative and smart. I love video games. So it's interesting, like the dots do fit. I mean, I played a lot of video games in my life, and somehow games are coming back into my life as a way to serve humanity. And so, I love health, and that's coming back to serve humanity. So there has been patterns, but definitely this was created from saying yes to the magical breadcrumbs that's been presented to me for sure.
And I'm getting goosebumps. And for the listeners, like what this breadcrumbs, the prime example is what I shared earlier at the beginning of this podcast. I shared a post on Facebook. What is the purpose of life? Yeah. Got probably like 200 comments, inclusive of my own comments, but that at least like over 100 people. You only responded with 6 words, and like to remember that we're divine is not that unique or special, but within that, the duality was so unique to me and so special to me. Of all the other comments and of the 100 people plus, I didn't ask a single person to be on the podcast except for you. And I don't know you. I don't even know, but somehow I just gravitated like Steve must have some wisdom behind his 6 words to go and look into your timeline, check out what you do. And I still like only got a glimpse of what you do, but within that 6 words, it was enough intuitively to sense that there's something more to you. And at this present moment, there isn't anyone else I would want to connect and learn from, and for the world to learn from you as well. So I'm sure there's some divine plan in play, whether it's just this podcast or something much greater than that we could help one another.
Yeah, so I'll give you some interesting other breadcrumbs. So recently I started dating another Plat member, and I look over her phone and your name came up in a WhatsApp group messaging the Plat group. These are all little magical breadcrumbs. Yeah, for sure.
Huh. Wow, I didn't even know you're Plat as well.
Oh, I'm not. I'm basically seeing someone that is, and then literally in the last 2 days, for some reason, her phone was next to me, and I looked over. I was like, "Oh, there's your name," and it's you messaging within the WhatsApp Plat groups. The hints from the universe, like there's something there, right? And because what are the chances of that? That's like astronomical. So.
Yeah, the last guest, he's been awakened for 20 plus years and been into shamanism for the last 20 years as well, and very entrepreneurial, so very grounded into the stuff, but yet have all this spiritual wisdom. We talked for like 2.5 hours. And then at the end, he, like during the podcast, he shared to read this book. This book really, and there's a movie version as well, this Celestine Prophecy that kind of like changed his life. And within the next day, someone sent me a book like on WhatsApp to say, hey, I just got sent this, somebody just gave me this book. I've never heard of that book before.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, like, this is magical. So I watched the movie with my wife like right away that night.
Yeah, for sure. Aside from us, physical selves, our higher selves, they've already been planning this and doing this, right? Because in the spirit world, there's no time. And so all of this has happened in their reality, and they're just like putting little magical hints in front of us. So for sure.
So I want to ask a question. I'll ask this one first. My wife and I did the plant medicine together, and like I had my whole journey, and I thought it's all over, and she was still going through her one. And then when we got together, like, because we were in one of those ceremonies, we're not allowed to talk and interact with each other. So when the ceremony closed, like, I started interacting with her, and we were going up to the room, and that's when like the second wave of the Aya hit me. It's like, whoa! But what was beautiful is that I felt that I got to meet her on a soul-to-soul level for the first time ever. Yeah. And it was no ego from both sides. It was just divine, that interaction. It just, like, all this stuff keep channeling through, things that we had challenges to overcome, like some for months, some for years. But hey, this is what's been blocking it, that's been blocking it, and we've just been communicating back and forth. It was magical. So can you help me make sense of what actually happened? Is it our soul actually communicated? Our ego was gone? What was that about?
I always like to set a certain frame of understanding before answering these questions. So from my understanding, it's very common that in the personal revelation world, I'm not a big fan of the word growth. So the personal revelation world, ego gets a bad rap. Like I always joke, like ego has like the worst PR agency ever, right? Because like, oh, people let go of your ego, let go of your ego. Ego is just as important and useful as spirit, right? Because if you have no ego and you want to go and dabble in spirituality, your spirit and soul may never have an anchor and a homing beacon to come back to. Right, very important, because I know a lot of people who try to let go of their ego and to do plant medicines, and when I talk to them afterwards, I can sense they're not fully back yet. Right, their spirit isn't, and their soul.
There's no reason to come back. There's no reason to live. Right, you got no attachment.
Right, it's almost like in their eyes you can see there's almost something not quite back, not quite there, and so in my reality, ego is very useful. However, if it's only ego and no spirit, then we're in trouble, right? Then it's all about like self-worth and proving myself and being good enough and defining who I am and all that stuff. And you will be carving and boxing things in your vibrational interaction with others, and other people typically don't like to be carved and boxed, right? And so the harmony of spirit and ego together can be very serving. And so most likely when you talk to your wife in that moment, right, there might have been like the ego like took a bow and said, hey, spirit, why don't you go ahead and come and use that frame of reality and that vibration and that approach to interact with your wife. And most likely that happened because in that moment, her soul and spirit invited it, right? Because it takes kind of two, like the door has to be open. And so in that beautiful moment, both of your souls, and it could have been for the first time in a long time or ever, met each other purely in that state. Right. And of course, keep in mind that the plant medicine, of course, is making this, you can feel it much more, right? You can experience it much more. Mm-hmm. And so, and it's beautiful. And I believe that can happen, again, anytime that we want, moment to moment. It's just what's more powerful is how do we open that door, right, at will. And what's interesting is you kind of, it'd be linear to be like, why don't we just keep that door open all the time? Well, that's not serving either, right? But it's learning like how can we open that door to have our souls connect when we choose to. That I think that could be an interesting discussion. So
I definitely want to explore that, and as well as the 8 different paths that you can go through this journey. But what I want to go back is talk about the awakening journey. So my understanding from my personal observation, there are 3 main categories of different types of awakening. One, you've got the people like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie, they're just spontaneous awaken. Like one day they're sleeping on the park bench and just like dwelling on human misery. The next day is like completely like Buddha Zen-like. Click, and it just happens overnight. And the next group is with knowledge or with over time, it just suddenly just become more and more awakened gradually. I find myself kind of in the middle of the two. The journey seems like pretty fast paced, and every single night or every single day, it feels like I'm a different person. especially at the beginning growth spurt of the awakening journey. It's been probably the second year now. So especially for the first 18 months, I've got the intuition, the calling that there's nothing you need to do. Just absorb and witness transformation. And that made it a lot easier. And obviously some people go through the awakening journey a lot longer, 5 to 10 years. And so you seem very grounded. You seem like that you're not the kid in the candy store anymore. That, hey, what's this superpower? What's this new wisdom? Or, hey, look at this new text that I just downloaded. It's got all this ancient wisdom, this new shaman, these goodies that you can download. So for the people that are either in the awakening journey right now or about to start or haven't started yet, what can they expect?
It's so funny that you said that, because just a couple of weeks ago, so you might know her, Mariah Brown, she's a Platt, and so we're kind of dating, and she had made a comment because she's sort of just in that heightened, awakening process, and she would learn all these things. She gets all excited. She would show me, and I'd be like, yeah. And she's like, how come you're not excited? Why don't you get excited? So I was like, well, it's I've been down this journey long enough, right? So just got started early, and mainly because when I was young, not only was I unhealthy, I was just extremely unhappy, right? So that was the switch for me, right? And so the origin of this path was some type of pain, basically, right? And what you'll find is that the greater the pain, because it's the pendulum, the more you pull that one side and you let go, the greater the swing. But some people, it's a little pull, and it's just a little swing. And so there is no right or wrong way, right? Some people are meant for that big swing, and some people are meant for that little swing. And so there's that. There's no how can I do this faster? Because I believe that we are not in as much control as we think, right? Because this grand design for us that in the oneness world we've already created for us, in the duality world, the spirits, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, created for us. So trusting in that path is very profound, because ultimately, if you don't trust that path and you feel like I need to go faster, you're healing, you're vibrating high, you can experience things fully. In a state of dis-ease, you're brewing diseases, you're thinking of the future, you're thinking of what you don't have and what you want and all that stuff. And so trusting the path and the rate of things would be my first recommendation. And then following that, if the question is, what would be any advice or I guess any tips for anyone on this journey, know that it's going to happen, right? Because there's enough people who have already waken up that they've built so much magnetic attraction. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is astrologically, we're in a time of humanity where people are waking up automatically. Right. This is very different than 50 years ago. And so trust that it will happen. It won't require force for some of you that are listening. And some of you, it will require force. It just depends on your soul journey. Right. Because think of it as in other variations of your life, in other dimensions, if we don't use time. If we use time, I will say words like in a previous life, you've learned certain things about you. In other words, it's almost like you've learned how to do this, and now you want to learn this. And this is the life that you designed for you way before you were born, right? And again, in a timeline reality. In a non-timeline reality, we can say you're experiencing this version of all possible versions for a reason, right? And so just trust in that path.
So with people that are swinging the pendulum and feeling a lot of pain right now, especially with COVID-19, business collapsing and people they care about suffering, would your recommendation be for them to get by this period?
Yeah. I love this question. Sure. A couple things. So again, before answering that question, we can set the frame so the answer can be fully understood. And so one, keep in mind that many cultures celebrate the loss of your physical form. Right? Because now that spirit is no longer trapped by the illusion of five senses. And so there are many cultures where the loss of your physical form is this is amazing. Thank God that person can move on to the next form. And so why not embody some of those cultures' mindset, right? Because I don't see death as a bad thing. I see it as a liberating, amazing thing. Because if you think about it, the statistics kind of backs up this reality, right? 94% of Americans, if we just look at America, who are dying from COVID-19, have an existing comorbidity. It means basically they were suffering from some kind of illness. And just think, the death ends that suffering from illness, right? And now they can begin anew. As long as you believe that death is not the end, right? If you believe in whether it be reincarnation or some other next thing, they get to begin that thing once they lose their physical form. And so once you adopt this strategy and story, then already a lot of the suffering is no longer a suffering. On the not death reality, such as losing a business and stuff, well, a couple things, right? So ultimately, we get to choose a story. The thing is just a thing. Like what's really happening is, let's say someone has a business generating X revenues, and now X revenues are gone. That's the facts. The story we get to make of it could be, I lost my business. That is one story. Another story could be, oh my God, COVID-19 showed me that this business, if I check in with myself, was I really doing that out of joy and fulfillment and my purpose? Or was this business purely because I wanted to prove something, or I was taught that that business gives me a certain amount of finances and that equals freedom and so on and so forth, right? It's a great time to question, who are you really, right? And so it becomes the greatest opportunity to detach from something we were over attached to. This is another story, right? Which is different than I lost my business. And so in other words, we get to choose the meaning. The facts are the revenues and the customers are not coming in, or people are not purchasing my product. That's the facts. The story we assign to it, be very careful how you craft that story. And you have sovereignty over how you craft the story. Don't let the mass media let you craft that story. This is not a crisis. They're calling it a crisis. I don't see it as a crisis. I see it as a lot of change is happening. That's the facts. There's a lot of change happening. We get to decide the story behind it. So make sure that you don't let mass media program you with their words. Take sovereignty over your own words and your own story.
Wow. And I was going to ask you, what about the people that's suffering in physical pain? But then like while you were talking, it gave me the answers is that, well, you went through physical pain and that's triggered your whole transformation. So who knows that is not the instigator for big evolution in yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are many times, we do these healing retreats, and our entire team, we have shamans, mechanical, biological, mindset experts, all there supporting the unfolding of people's divine essence. And there are times where I will, on purpose, it looks mean from the outside, but intuitively, I am on purpose pushing people into their pain, because I know that we get to leverage that pain and it becomes their greatest transformation. We don't do this for everyone. That is not the path for everyone, but from experience, from doing this long enough, that is the path that is the most serving for that unique individual. And so having seen that from doing enough of these experiences, I personally, my story isn't to prevent that for people, right? Because for some people, that path actually is meant for them.
Yeah. Some people I've seen, especially in these, some of the retreats with plant medicine, especially after the first night or first couple of nights when someone have had a traumatic experiences in the journey, they are very reluctant to go through the ceremony again for the next night. What advice would you share with them, especially just touch on like using pain as leverage?
Sure. And again, I will always go to larger frame and then answer the question. So keep in mind that the facts are what they experienced was a heightened emotional experience, right? They saw something of a heightened emotion. Once we label it as traumatic, we've already assigned a meaning to it. This is fascinating when you start to analyze language. Mass media right now, the words trigger and trauma are very popular. This is all by design, taking our sovereignty away. Right. And so for anyone listening, just be very choosy as to the words. And so I would say to that person, well, you had a heightened emotional experience. Tell me about the story that you've assigned to that experience. And again, if we can revamp that story and choose a story that's the most serving for them, then maybe the next night they're okay. And just think, doesn't matter what you've seen or what you've been shown by plant medicine, the practice of sovereignty over your language and story crafting ultimately is the practice of controlling your reality. The portal, the plant is just the accelerant. The end destination people want basically is sovereignty over the reality. And that practice is the sovereignty over language and story crafting. right? And so just be very aware that mass media language is absolutely on purpose taking people's sovereignty away by choosing their words for them. Trigger and trauma. Very big words right now that I opt out of those two words, basically. Yeah.
So are you suggesting, regardless of whether it's through plant medicine, going through oracle cards, tarot cards, and psychic readings, palm readings, whatever it is, because a lot of the times that we consciously or subconsciously have given at least a bit of a power away, that some greater force is controlling us. So if it says on my palm or on a tarot card, or if I receive a certain dream or certain things, whatever is a higher meaning, if the meaning that the card says is negative, then we still have the sovereignty to determine whether it is actually negative in its overall frame.
Yeah. Yeah, because a tarot card might say things like, you will be divorced or you will lose your business, right? Let's say that is actually factual and they literally have a crystal ball to tell you exactly what's happening. It's not negative, right? It's just the facts. The story in which you interpret it dictates if it's for you internally a helpful or not helpful thing. This is very powerful to realize, right? In other words, you actually may not have control over your destiny, but you have full control over the experience of this destiny, the story of it. Right? Like if I wanted to right now fly to your house and take a big sword and chop off your arm, you may not be able to stop me. But you can say, hey, Steve is a real dick. He came over all this way to chop off my arm. Or you can say, oh my God, Steve is such a gift. Because I have lost my biological arm, I am now going to get a mechanical arm that is even better than my biological arm. You can craft whatever story you want. Right? You may not control me in chopping your arm off, but you get to control the story. This is a very powerful distinction. People are trying to control the actions. What is more powerful than controlling the actions is controlling the story. Because you can have the most amazing actions for you, but you're caught up in the same story.
Yeah. What are the 8 ways that you talked about that we could open these portals? And because I think like most of our listeners, or if you're watching the video, you can see that you're so centered and grounded. You've got all this wisdom in how to navigate through life, but yet you are this loving and kind person that cares about humanity, that I think a lot of people aspire, not wanting to be another version like you, but we all aspire to be a better version of ourselves. So why one of the reasons I call it cosmic schooling my kids, because we're not taught in school on how to transcend our consciousness. We're not taught on how to be a kinder person. We indoctrinate that you should be kind, but how do we become kind? How do we not get emotionally charged during certain events that may be triggering? So what are the different ways that we could kind of like transcend our existing way of looking at life?
While I don't know all the 8 paths, again, because it's almost like, if you have an accountant in your business, I don't want to be the master accountant, just like you go do the accounting. So we literally have a team member who has studied all the mystery schools in the world, all the different shamanic practitioner schools, all the different ancient culture schools in the world for the last 33 years. Like she is one of the top experts at this. And so she teaches courses and all the stuff about the 8 paths. I know obviously one of them is plant medicine. And the 2 most common right now is plant medicine and breath work. Yeah. Right. We all know like holotropic breathing, all kinds of stuff can access this stuff. And so I definitely don't claim to be an expert in the 8 paths. I know in this phase of my life, I have used meditation being another one, of course. And so I've used those 3 mainly. I am currently not called to explore additional paths because I feel like I'm already on the path, if that makes sense. I'm in a phase of my life right now. It's about like fine tuning and refining. And really using that, again, to birth this thing. I have a very strong calling right now to birth this thing for the world. And so, but if any of the listeners want to learn the other 8 paths, I'm sure at the end of this conversation, we can share with people like where to go to learn more about what I do. And on there, I can kind of type in something where people can talk to one of our team members for sure. In Ammortal business, I have a few businesses in Ammortal where we're doing all this. Every practitioner on our team is already a top expert in their field and they have their own businesses. I've just created a vision powerful enough to kind of borrow them here and there throughout the year to do our events and create some of the things that we're creating. So these are literally the top experts at what they do. Like this woman that I'm talking about, she has certified all the NLP practitioners, experts in Canada, and 40% of all NLP experts in the US. Yeah, I mean, that's how high level it is. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. So
we are in the process. This is literally in the launch process.
Okay.
And the idea just came 2 weeks ago, and it just happened very synchronistically. We launching a portal kind of called awakenedmasters.com, because I been in marketing for the last 20 years. I realized that how much work is required to get each additional likes, subscribers, comments, and views. Is a lot of work. And if you're just sending all this to one person, it's hard yard. And this is like being on the face and being on stage is not my biggest gift. In fact, it's not something I really gravitate towards. Talking to you is like I enjoy, but going deep down, being a master at it is also not my craft as well. But to help you accentuate your message and other masters that other people can learn from, that's where I get my most buzz from. So
awesome.
Now that's another breadcrumb that's been revealed. That's why we got connected. Yep. So talk me through about your app. Like, what is it going to look like? How does it actually help people to transcend their consciousness and wake up?
Sure. Yeah. Like any app, right? So, it'll be both on Android and iPhone operating systems. And think of it as the app. So we've identified 7 different realms that if you took action towards and mastered, it would basically unlock like your full sovereignty over your system, we'll call it, right? And so those different realities rely in the body space, right? You do stuff to your body. Of course, the mind, chemical or detoxification of your body, your gut health, right? And keep in mind that we're basically promoting this as a health app because I don't think right now in 2020, people are searching for, let me wake up and access my divine self app, right? And so keep in mind that it is on the surface a health app where we're healing your gut and detoxing you and improving and resolving your body and fixing your sort of biological stuff. However, the brilliance of it is during the interaction with it. For example, there's sacred geometry hidden. In the way in which you play the game, you're actually experiencing the divine self, right? So it's not explicit. It is kind of implied and subconscious. And I find that when you use the explicit, when I tell you do this, like those are boxes, but hidden if in the periphery, if there's no box around it, if the design of it embodies the divine essence, they're actually getting that into the system much more readily available, right? So it's almost like the other way to say it is, I'm kind of giving away our secrets, but consciously it's improving your health so you don't get sick and all that stuff. Subconsciously, it's waking you up, right? That's sort of how, through the experience of the designs. And we're leveraging game psychology, behavioral science to get people to actually take the actions to continue down this journey, basically. And so, and we don't want to be the end-all providers. For example, if we want people to meditate, we don't have our own meditation courses. We will send people to go and buy a Muse or use a heart math and use other devices. And so we don't want to be the solution provider. We want to be the behavioral design expert in getting people to change their behaviors. And we refer people out to different service providers, different tech, different products. And so it becomes an amazing model where we're like the glue that kind of sticks everything together to make this work, basically.
Wow. And when you say we, who's part of the team?
Yeah, so I'm like the, scientist, whatever, to design this. But, my business partner, Brian Leggett, he had an Inc. 9 company, like the 9th fastest growing company in the US at once. He currently still advises, I think, like 26 different entrepreneurs. He's like a uber actual smart entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for 26 years, but he's like an uber entrepreneur. And so he's the partner on the business side of it. And then we have within our network just, amazing people who are supporting this project. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Can't give all the details away until it reveals, but yeah, there's a lot of support from some very influential people who has the power to get this out into the world very rapidly, supporting this. Because people realize there's something's got to be done about the healthcare system. Forget mindset and forget divine stuff. Like our healthcare system is completely, And, COVID-19 is a great surfacer of truth that our healthcare system isn't quite working.
And how far is the app being launched?
So we'll have that beta version in 3 months. And so, obviously you will be in that initial early adopter invite people. And so we'll get, maybe about 1,000 of our friends to kind of be that first early adopter group. And then through their playing of the game and feedback, we'll take that data. And then I believe 6 months after that will be the version that's available for millions and millions and millions of people.
Yeah, so if you want to get on the early release and get notified it's been released, where do they go?
Yeah, we haven't even gotten that far yet. So our main website is Ammortal with 2 M's, Ammortal. I'm sure at some point we'll put something up on the website about it. And so even the name of the company is really interesting. So, so Ammortal with 1 M is a being that has always existed and will always exist, which is God, basically. And then we have mortal, which is us. And so to play on words, we have Ammortal with 2 M's because it's God within mortal, right? That's why the 2 M's. So it's Ammortal within Ammortal. And so the entire name of the company is already suggesting we are divine.
It's funny because the Awakening Master, we also have the initial AM as well. And the logo, the symbol is actually A and M, with the background being a sacred geometry, the flower of life. And the A and M is obviously one of the, people say I am is one of the most powerful words. So with the I, it's almost like it's in the middle. It's almost like opening a door to the gateway to the flower of life and everything else. We've used the color yellow together with black and white, because if you look at spiral dynamics, that will help to transcend the way that we operate as humanity is the color yellow. So there's a lot of commonality. So I'm going to segue a bit and wanted to learn more about how you approach fatherhood and also in relationship as well. Because as a conscious parent, as a conscious partner, one of the first things when I woke up, when I started waking up, my relationship is already have a lot of learning lessons for me to embed. And when I started changing as a person, I barely know who I am. I don't expect my friends or my family or my loved ones to automatically attach to who I am, because who they met me and fell in love with is every day it seems like I'm a different person. So the paradigm of me looking at marriage, which is a framework that someone institute, that just because you made a vow commitment to someone once upon a time, and you're meant to be with that person. I said to my partner, I don't see it that way anymore. If I'm with you because I'm choosing to be with you at this present moment, not because of some vow commitment I made ages ago. Yes, I take into consideration family and everything else and a lot of other commitments that we've both got together. And I don't know what I conceptually coming up with is what is going to be the way in the next 6 months or next 6 years or next 60 years. But at least I can observe myself. The way that I look at life is constantly changing. And so parenting and marriages and relationship is all evolving over time. So how do you approach parenting and relationships?
Yeah, I love this question. I've written about this. So you know how if you ever talk to any master of anything, in the path towards mastery, we want to learn all this stuff. But if you actually talk to the master, you just keep it simple and just do this, right? And so for sure, in thinking about this for many, many years, I've simplified parenting as 2 things. That's it, right? One is when you're in the presence of your children, as much as possible and as often as possible, fully embody 100% acceptance of who you are. Right? Because if you're not, you are vibrating that into them, and subconsciously you're, through light particles, telling them, don't accept yourself. Right? So as much as possible, when you're in their physical presence, know I'm fully accepting exactly who I am. Right? And so that's taking care of the vibrational frame. From an intense psychological lesson, what am I supposed to do as a parent frame? I keep it very simple, which is help them see all obstacles as opportunities. And that's it. Right? Because if they can see all obstacles and friction points in their lives as opportunities, I never had to worry about them. I never had to create any kind of external circumstance for them, because it doesn't matter what the circumstance is, they will see it as a opportunity. Right now, a great example of this, when my daughter, who's 11 now, when I was 9, she fell and had a cut across her face. And she had to get 36 stitches across her face. Right? And so, and when she came home from the hospital, she said, today was the best day of my life. right? She was like, I got to feel what stitches feel like. I got to meet mommy's friends at the hospital. Best day of my life. So that's an example of practicing this whole obstacle as opportunities. It controls their frame, right? When my younger daughter, so she's 8, I think she was 6, we live near a lake. And so she came crying to me. And I was like, oh, what happened? And she's like, oh, these kids threw rocks at me. And I said, wow, you're so lucky. She's like, why? I was like, well, you get to practice forgiveness so much more often than any other kid. And she's like, oh, thanks. And then she was like happy and ran away. Right? Instead of saying, oh, those kids are blank and labeling the kids as something, or, oh, you'll be okay, just a reframe of an obstacle as an opportunity. So, I just simplify parenting as that, like embody the 100% acceptance of self, and just how do you reframe and rewrite the story of every obstacle as an opportunity.
Wow, I love it. So simple, so effective. So the 100% acceptance of yourself, what does that look like externally? Are you still allowed to be angry, to have pissed off at different things? And
definitely. You can express whatever emotion. It doesn't mean that I am emotionless in front of them. But what it does mean is that, let's say if I do raise my voice at them, which does happen occasionally, that I can go back to them afterwards and fully apologize and recognize that is just me accepting who I am as a human, and that they did not deserve that tone towards them in that moment, and just talking through that. Right? And so it gives you full acceptance, embracing our entire dynamic as a human, right? And we're not meant to be stoic around them all the time. That would not serve them. Like, just think if we were stoic around them all the time, or only loving around them all the time, that almost subconsciously embeds that if they show any other emotion, it's not right. Right. And so you do want to express a full range of emotions from them, and then show them and talk through an experience and vibrate to them that is okay.
So 100% acceptance, is that similar or the same as like taking 100% ownership?
I think it's deeper than ownership, right? Ownership would be almost like an accountability thing. I think acceptance is like I am fully in love with me, whatever the version of me right now is showing up as. I feel like that's a little bit deeper than ownership.
Got it. So let me just try to practice it into play. Last night, my 2 boys fighting over the last remaining salty egg, like, Chinese congee egg. And they're bickering about it. And it's just, dude. And the younger one said, hey, you can have it, like in almost like as a throwaway. I don't want it anymore. And he wasn't happy with it. And before I got to complete the sentence, you've done well, he thought that was criticizing him. As that's it, you're in trouble. And I'm sure that in our past communication, tonality or wording I've used, that the ending is showed up that way. So in that situation, what I could have done if I was fully accepting, like if I get triggered, I get triggered. I did apologize to him pretty much right away for raising my voice. I was teaching them it wasn't that acquires the most external stuff is the best person. Is the person that not needing the external, in fact, is able to give or to be content needing the external attachment. That's the best. But I sense that is a limiting teaching that is giving them certain duality frame is one is better than other, half is better than not half, or not half is better than half. So what would you have done in that situation in the teaching part, in using every obstacle as a gift?
The frame of like embodying self-love, and the reason I recommend that is it's too much to be so on top of our tone, right? Because they say like 80% of communication is nonverbal, and so our body language and our tone, we can't micromanage at all, right? And so you could try. To me, the simpler way is just embody complete self-love and self-acceptance, right? Because in that, the tone in which auto adjusts, you're in alignment. It's almost like you're managing the energy and not the physicality of it, right? And so once you have that in place, and the strategy of obstacles and opportunities is a strategy, the tactical stuff, right? The actions basically is what you're asking me. While I can't advise what to say because I would have to know your kids and you and the dynamics, what I can say is this: be very mindful of in each interaction, like in sales, they talk about who has frame control, right? And so whoever has frame control essentially has the power. And so know that when a parent always has frame control, they're kind of taking power away from their child, right? And so when you're telling your kid something, you're basically you have power and they in the moment don't, right? Because you're the teacher and they're the student in a way in that situation. And so parents get to be mindful of, there's definitely moments you want to be the teacher and they're the student. There are moments where you can both co-create, and there are moments where maybe they're the teacher, right? And so just be very mindful. And if we want to be very mathematical, maybe 33% of the time kind of works. If you find that you're 90% or 50% or 70% the teacher, then revise your strategy, right? So at least be mindful. So in that case, you could use questions such as, hey guys, how can we practice more kindness in this situation, right? And that could be a practice, or that could be a question where they actually, that to me, that's a co-creating stuff, like a question, right? And so a way to give them frame is like, can you guys help me? Right? You're asking them for help, so they get frame control and power. Can you guys help me understand this situation and how we can practice blank, right? Whatever. And so just being mindful of like that frame can be very powerful. Who's in control? Can you basically power, like who has power? Who's taking power? Who's giving power? Or can we co-create power? And just find some harmony between all three deliveries.
Yeah, I read a lot of the newer paradigm of parenting and also teaching in school as well. There's some school that has adopted like a very different type of approach, and the collaborative with the students, asking them to come up with solution like disciplinary issues and co-creating the rules of the school and stuff like that, or how do we, if someone is late all the time, how do we help this person versus how do we discipline this person? That works really, really effective. What you just shared is really great. And also another thing that I got from you is that I haven't embodied seeing every obstacle as a gift myself. That's why I wasn't in a state to even come up with those solutions, because a lot of times when I'm triggered, almost every time when I'm triggered, is that I haven't seen those obstacles as a gift yet.
And as we get to embody that practice, it will more and more naturally come through our words and our being. Like when I said to my daughter, oh, you're so lucky in practicing forgiveness, that wasn't me intellectually processing it and thinking what's the best thing to say and then saying it, because there wasn't time for that. It's just through practice. It just comes out naturally because I was practicing that way. Yeah, and for sure.
It's more important to practice on your being. And it's almost like playing basketball or tennis or golf, any sport, visualizing you succeeding versus like, hey, in tennis, my wrist shouldn't be in a certain position. And then your whole focus, where is my wrist being placed? And your whole other body parts could be out of swing. So that's really helpful. What about in relationship? What golden wisdom do you have to share?
It's interesting that you asked that. So, I'm currently experiencing lots of change in my relationships personally. Basically, when I was in end of November, I believe. And again, even how I got there was through a series of magical breadcrumbs. I had met someone. I was actually scheduled to go to this one event, and I saw that there was another event that coincided, and I saw the picture of the guest speaker, and my download was, I got to go talk to this person. I canceled the other event, went to this event, met this person. He just happened to be on my connecting flight, the only person in the whole group. And then from there, we kind of hit it off. Then he invited me to go to Rhythmia with Jack Canfield. And
I know that particular trip. My friend Michelle Starr was on that trip as well.
Sure. Yeah. So Michelle was in our group with, Panache and 9 of us. We were like in our own little section. And so from attending that was when I met Mariah, and which is very interesting how in that trip, I just met her that day, like Sunday. It's a 4-day journey. So Monday I had like all these downloads, and I never take notes because I can typically just remember everything. But the next morning I was like, I remembered nothing. I was like, what just happened? And so I was like, all right, on Tuesday, I'm going to bring a notebook and a pen with me. But the game plan was like, when I get any downloads, I'll like write it down so I don't forget it. And so interestingly, I had a few notes, but one of the notes was essentially to like love Mariah because it helps her remember her essence as love. And so afterwards, when we were like all sobered up in a way, I actually told like, I'm married. This is not like a pickup line. And I tell her this. And she was like, oh, that's nice. And then the next day we had multiple visions of previous lives together, right? Or other versions of reality. And we had the same images. And I believe that because of what I said the day before, it opened up the trust in the communication to even talk about that the next day. And so, and from that, she came to one of our healing events. I think it was like 2 weeks after that. And actually at that event, again, more downloads came. I said things to her that I wouldn't even say to, my wife, who I've known for like 2 decades, right? And so from that, I decided to follow like my soul and what my soul was telling me, which was, have a connection, a relationship with her. And so throughout all of this, keeping in mind like married, kids, and all that stuff. And while it was a time of a lot of change, I'm a huge fan of how do I just simplify everything. And so the way I simplify it, essentially the advice I would give you for anyone listening is when you are deciding, strategizing, and acting and speaking, make sure you're in the state of love. And I put that into practice, and what would be considered the impossible has happened in every which way. There's been no friction in this transition phase. And even some pretty magical stuff, like 5 months before all this happened, someone gave me a book at a plant medicine journey. He's like, I was called to give you this book. And I flipped through the book, and it was basically about Buddhism. I was like, I've read many of these. I never read it. I put the book in my office upstairs. And in this process, my soon-to-be ex-wife reads the book. And from reading this book, she messages Mariah and says, I give you full permission to engage and be with Steve, right? Fascinating. That would have never happened if that book wasn't there. And so a lot of really magical stuff has happened in my relationship world. And I believe that it's all worked out really well because of that embodying, acting, thinking, deciding out of that state of love.
And it's also like what you said earlier about placing the meaning to certain situation, because traditionally people say, well, a marriage or husband and wife or father and mother splitting up is not a good thing. But that's in our limited understanding of what our life path should be.
Yeah. I mean, I even decided not to use those words, right? And we weren't splitting. Even the way I relate to the kids, we're making room to add more love into everyone's lives. And that's exactly what's happening. So right now I'm in my house with soon to be my ex-wife with Mariah. We're all in this house, right? And normally people are like, how is this happening? Like, aren't there going to be a lot of this and this? And there isn't. And so it's one of the beauties of actually being able to control your reality. And some would say things like manifesting. I think that's a little bit too broad. I think the path of controlling your reality is mastering language. In every which way I've talked about this, I opted out of divorce or even the word marriage, right? Because I've talked to a shaman about this. The vibrational energy of marriage has already been tainted because in America especially, there's a 50% divorce rate. And so I'm even choosing not even to use that word in our relationship and bypassing the vibration and not using those spells. That's a little bit of a tactical thing. And combining that with sort of acting out of this love. And just having clear communication with my soon-to-be ex-wife is that I'm still going to be in your life, right? Like we're still going to, my vision is in the future, we'll all travel together, everyone's hanging out. She'll hopefully have her other significant person. There is no separation in this. We're just changing the dynamic of all of this.
Yeah, I know one of my friends in the States. It's rare, but he's separated from his wife and they both got a partner and they go on holidays together with the 2 kids. And in fact, They've got more people to love them than ever before.
That's my game plan.
I've heard of conscious uncoupling and different things, but you guys have actually embodied, and kudos to all parties involved. And it is a challenging paradigm. And a lot of people, external noises, if you let it happen, they'll say, hey, how could you let this happen? And you're wrong and you're a victim and all these other things. But the reality is everything is perfect in its imperfection.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I came to realize, in my early 20s through my meditation was when I'm on my deathbed, and I plan on living at least 150 years old. So when I'm 150 something on my deathbed, I guarantee you I'm not going to have this thought, which is, damn it, I should not have done that out of love, right? It was just like a big, I was like, oh, if I just do things out of love, I actually will not have any regrets in life.
You talked about it now because I can tell that you obviously done a lot of spiritual work. You're not reliving the past. But during the times of making the tough decision of separating from your wife, was it difficult at the time? Was it, like as long as I'm in love, it was pretty zen, or was it like quite humanly that, hey, like it was a tough decision and there was like tough days or tough weeks or tough months to go through?
Yeah, for sure. It did not come without a lot of consideration, right? There was high consideration and large volumes of consideration. I chose for it not to be tough because I choose my life to be with ease and grace. And so that doesn't mean that it did not come with high volumes of consideration for sure. And it came with a lot, hours and hours and hours of discussing with all parties involved, like hours of discussing and just flushing out, what is hidden, right? For example, after talking for like 4 hours in just one of many nights, I found out that one of the biggest fears, concerns, things that make her sad with my soon-to-be ex-wife is not losing me in terms of, husband and wife. It's losing the ability to talk to me about some deeper stuff. And I was like, well, you're not losing that. It's not like just because our label is changing, it doesn't mean that when you call me, I'm going to be like, nope, not talking. And once that was flushed out, she felt much more at peace, right? It's just about surfacing all the things and revealing all the things that are hidden and just spending a lot of attention in that. And of course, in those discussions, there were definitely moments of blaming coming and going. And my job was to embrace love and center and back to that vibration, always centering back to that love vibration, no matter what is being thrown at me, for sure.
When I was first waking up and there's challenges in the relationship, I hear from different people that's going through the awakening journey. Sometimes you leave your friends and your partners behind, and sometimes family as well. When you were waking up, or most of your understanding of the whole process, is it unique to each person that typically some relationship will fall apart, some people will keep going and transcend? And more so importantly, how do you deal with both parties, for the person that's waking up and for the person that next to you suddenly just changed completely to a different person? How do you overcome that?
These are great questions. So I know in my lifetime, I've had a few very close friends that I just don't talk to anymore. And mainly because I found that once I started to realize certain things, they basically complained all the time. Even though great friends, they just kind of complained all the time. And so I chose not to be in that vibration at such high volume. And so just over the years, we would, talk a little bit less and talk a little bit less. And I'm okay with that, right? And so that will happen for some people. But some people may choose to hold on to that friend if they recognize the value in experiencing that for them. And that could be very valuable to some people as a mirror. I felt in my personal decision for me, that was not serving, right? And so I guess there is no just do this in this question. I think it's a matter of you have choice. For sure, there will be changes within you. There'll be changes within the external people, maybe going through their own journeys. And always go back to, the simplicity of it is what's the story? Like how this story that I'm experiencing that I've created serve me? And if it doesn't serve me, craft a different story. And if you craft a certain story that you feel authentically is the most aligned and most serving, and that story does not go with the other person, that person decides to leave your life, then it's meant to be. That's the way I look at it, because you're not the boss of other people. I say to all the people all the time, I'm not the boss of you, right? Yeah. And so if you decide to take that action, even though I feel like I'm acting truly deeply from my highest place, not just serving me, but for all humans and all people involved, and you still decide to act that way, I'm okay with that.
What about for the person that's not gone through the awakening journey and witnessing their friend or their partner, especially their intimate partner, just changed, or even your kids or your parents? Well, probably less about your parents. The frame around it is awakened and not awakened. Isn't one is better than the next. It's almost like a toddler is not less than an adult. An adult doesn't want to be a toddler doesn't want to be an adult at the same time. It's part of the growth process. And again, growth almost like signifying the other end is better, but it's not. There's beauty in every single stages. So with that in mind, for the person that's not awakened, hasn't gone through the drama, is a better way of relating to them is maybe from the society, the mainstream way of labeling it is midlife crisis or people going through a tunnel. You haven't been through a tunnel, you don't know what that's like, but you've seen this person just suddenly change. You don't relate to them anymore, or you relate to them very differently, and you find it hard to connect. What can you share to the people that's observing this to help them create a more empowering?
If I want to be very Zen-like and meta with my answer, and if this was in a book, this is what you would typically read, which is whatever is a friction point about the other person is just a mirror in yourself that you have not worked through and processed and seen, right? There's all that. And so keep in mind that I still chose to not be around the complainers. I mean, even right now in Facebook, if I see anyone complain more than 3 times, I like unfollow immediately. And I recognize that in my own spiritual development right now, I'm actually putting some of the spiritual development on pause, because there's times when you expand your spirituality, and there's times you can benefit from contracting and output. I'm just in more of an output phase in my life. Like, I want to get this software and what I'm building, what I've been working on for the last 10 years out into the world. And like I said, in 10 years from now, with the download, then I'll expand. I'll go into the forest and go to Tibet and meditate for 10 years. And so recognize that my answer I'm about to give is coming from someone who actually is in a contraction phase and not an expansion phase. So recognize the answer is coming from that. So it's not the end all be all answer. And so in answering your question, I think it goes back to the person can have a choice, right? A choice in either accepting that person is actually, whatever that person's irritating, that you're not connecting with, whatever they're saying that you don't vibrate with, it's just something within you that you have not seen. Now, if you're coming from the fact that I'm the person that hasn't woken up and the other person is, what does the person who hasn't woken up, what's the advice for them? I guess the general advice is, there's much more to life than within your own perception. So be open to the fact that the other person has experienced something it's like you don't know what you don't know, and be open to you don't know what you don't know. So that would be the advice of that person. If you were asking it from the other person's perspective, the person that is woken up, what do you do about the person who hasn't woken up and you feel disconnect? Then the answer to that would be, there's a mirror, right? There's parts of you that you haven't fully accepted yourself. And if you did, the person that didn't wake up yet wouldn't actually be a thing for you if you're in that phase. If that makes sense.
Or heard it from somewhere that if the mirror is showing you certain lessons and you're not utilizing this opportunity to learn from it, even if you separate from the relationship, the same thing will be surfacing again in your next relationship. Not to say that you have to stick it out in this relationship. However, if whatever that lesson that needs to be taught has finished its course, and usually one of the signals is that both parties are willing to part ways versus it's just one person wants to go, the other person wants to stay. And if that's the case, there's probably unresolved issues that hasn't been fully learned or experienced.
Definitely. And sometimes that unresolved issue becomes that much more apparent as you end or change, right? In other words, there has to be some kind of energy moving sometimes for people to experience it. And you want to move that energy. And that energy movement could be changing, ending, separating, transitioning the relationship. It's something, right? You can't keep doing the same things for sure.
A lot of the times that I almost want to go to the mountains and be by myself. And that's why I look forward to the nighttime a lot. But the gift I've been given with the 3 kids and my wife is that there's a lot of mirrors each day for me to actually integrate and deepen my actual learning and do the practical tests instead of just learning the theoretical stuff.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's a lot of energy moving with 3 kids and a wife for sure. Yeah. And you just get to, take that energy movement and then craft a story that is the most serving for you and learn from that and expand and unfold from that as much as you want.
So now I think that we're almost coming full circle again. You talk about energy blockages and stuff like, I think in Buddhism, we talk about samskara when you got emotional stuff or traumatic stuff that's not resolved, then it's lingers in the body. And you talked about at the very beginning of this podcast that light is being blocked. So can you share a bit more about people experiencing a lot of the times? Obviously, if you fall over from a trampoline, it may not be from your emotional stuff that's trapped. Maybe it could be, who knows, that the universe is so marvelous in its creation. But for the most part, is it from stuff emotionally that's been trapped that's causing the disease?
Yeah, for sure. We can totally science this, right? So there's plenty of studies now showing that when we experience a heightened emotional experience in our lifetime, unless we reframe it and process it, then our epigenetics change, right? In other words, the genes that typically are dormant become active that express disease and inflammation, right? This is now science. And so to answer your question, for sure, our emotional experiences in our life unless we go back and retell the story, those unprocessed heightened emotional experiences are continuing affecting our health, right? Because if it's expressing inflammation biologically is the root cause of almost all illnesses: heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes. To give an idea, at one of our retreats, people were put under slight trance, so slight hypnosis, and they were asked, and we did this through some of the main emotions that don't serve us linearly, right? Guilt, shame, anger, and things. And so they were asked, once they were kind of put in trance, where was the origin of their guilt and their shame and their anger, one at a time. And to give an idea, the answers weren't when I was 5, when I was 3. The answers were 7 lifetimes ago, 80 generations ago. And then it was double checked through trance or through hypnosis. There was a process of helping them remove that. And if we went back into the now to check, do they still have the same physical response to that? And it no longer had it. So it's very fascinating when we get into this game that those emotions a lot of times are not embedded with this lifetime.
I remember like when my soul was talking to my wife's soul during the ceremony, to her that, hey, you know what's causing this particular problem that we're facing is actually this thing. But once you're able to change your behavior to address that, it actually helped generations of people in the past and also in the future, but also the whole collective humanity as well. And it just came downloaded through. I didn't even know what I was talking about at the time.
Yeah, because in that world, again, there is no time. And in reality, it's just different variations of the now. And every dimension of every possibility is all interrelated. Moving a piece in any dimension affects every other dimension. Yeah, for sure. I've definitely done work where I felt immediately all the previous lives changed, but really that's a timeline language. The other way to say it is all the other dimensions and versions have now changed based on an act, an intention, and a shifting in me now.
So I'm subscribing to the theory that what's happening to the world, a lot of people say if we keep this up, the humanity might get wiped out. And there's another theory that humanity is going to be okay no matter what. For me, there's parallel universe or infinite possibility is there. So if you decide to want to go to, it's almost like you play a video game. You have like 3 doors. Are you still running retreats?
Yes. One is May 23rd in Utah. So we used to travel all across the country and do it at different locations. At the most magical place, literally the entire protective energy field around it, and then inside it, they're the only place that has. Imagine a room like a yoga room where the entire floor is sound healing. The vibration from the bottom comes up into your body. And then all the walls are projection screens. So we can completely control the visual environment and the vibrational feeling of this room. And imagine being in that room and doing shamanic practices. It's very magical.
So is that depending on whether, I don't know, what's the situation in Utah? Is it still under lockdown? What's the situation there? Are you allowed to do events?
Yeah, so I don't think it will still be by that time, but we have it scheduled. The one after that is June 29th, and the one after that is, we basically have one there almost every 2.5 months, basically. So if for some reason May doesn't happen, my future self tells me it'll be fine. But for some reason that's wrong, which has never been, we would just go to the June one, basically.
Yeah, because I was just sensing whether you do a version of that online.
Yeah, I've thought about doing something like this online and conceptually went through it. It's possible it can't be exactly this, because at this event, to give it some idea, we literally have our healing chamber that we've invented. You get into this thing that looks like a tanning bed, and you put it over you, and then we have 4 different technologies happening to you at the same time that accelerates charging of energy, removal of inflammation, and rejuvenation of your cells all at the same time. And so obviously we can't reproduce that online. And it's actually a very important part of this entire process. So the entire approach is use science, super high level advanced science, and sacredness in harmony together in one experience. What I found, and from talking to a bunch of people who are into this, that is where magic happens. The science and the sacredness together, right? It's the duality, right? Ancient wisdom with new technology.
Yeah, wow. I look forward to getting a chance to go to one of your retreat. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. It's been like over 2 hours now, and I'm very respectful at you being so generous with your time and so generous with your wisdom as well. I'd love
Yeah,
to give you a hug sometime in the future. I'm sure we will. And
I'm
I'm
sure.
still marveling at how divine that we got connected and got the chance to do this podcast. So
Yeah.
if people want to learn more about you, where do they go? And you've already shared about Ammortal.com, which we'll put in the show notes. Are there
Yeah.
courses? Are there books? Are there things that they could start learning a bit more from what you've shared?
Yeah. So, I mean, if they really want to directly reach out to me, I do have multiple social media stuff, but the one I'm actually on, because not my staff, is Facebook. And so if they go on Facebook, it's still under my original way back brick and mortar name, which is Body Solutions Inc. They can find me or just Google or search like Dr. Steve Young. You'll see them. Some Asian guy smiling. That's me. I mean, I do have a YouTube channel. If you go on, I have a bunch of content there about mindset and health and fitness. Or you can just go on ammortal.com and go through contact. That's definitely another way to get a hold of me and some of the stuff we're working on. Yeah, and so we're just in the interesting transition phase of building out this app. Again, the vision is the app changes people's behaviors and get them to sort of reveal their divine essence. And we're actually working on a workstation where you cannot slouch and you actually move. You become more healthy while you work on the computer. And then the chamber will accelerate healing. And the combination of these three, I believe, will bypass the current system of sick care and actually provide true healthcare system.
You cannot slouch. I'm picturing some Houdini device contraption that's locking
Oh,
me in.
yeah. So it's interesting how that even came about. Like I was treating a patient one day and he was telling me about Adam Grant's book, Original, which is about a book about how do you have original ideas. And I didn't even read the book yet. He just told me about the framework. And then for some reason at lunch that day, that was in the morning, I had this download of like, what if I was an alien and I'd never been to Earth, but I intercepted digital files about how human anatomy works? What would I build for Earthlings? And I created something that doesn't exist. And so so we started building from that prototype, and now we're on version 5, and we're close to putting that on the market as well. So the timing of the app, the chamber is actually already ready for sale right now, and then the workstation all will be in the next 6 months.
Man, you do sound like someone from the future, and I'm so really glad that you came back from the future to share, give a glimpse of what you've seen in the future. And I look forward to getting a chance to also talk to you for another session in time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reason how we got on this call was not by accident. For sure, there'll be many future times where we get to play together, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
All right.